This class is called Critical Listening. Who was at the one yesterday? Raise your hand. Great. There's going to be a little bit of repeat today, but I've got some cool graphics to go along with it. So we'll kind of just jump into it here. If you don't know, if you weren't there yesterday, techtraining101.com is my website. So pretty much everything I'm doing here is there somewhere, or there's some other fun stuff out there. I haven't updated in a while, so I apologize if you've been there and you haven't seen anything new in a few months. Been busy. Anybody a web programmer? Yeah? I don't have any money, but you want to help? Anyway, I've got a lot of new stuff I'm going to be putting up in the next month or so, so be looking if you haven't. Go ahead. So today's class, critically listening. And I kind of subtitle it Inside the Mix, because I'm not really talking about listening to a classical song, being able to tell the difference between the violin and the viola and all the little things like real critically listening is. This is a more practical class for us everyday guys who are dealing with electric guitars, acoustic guitars, keyboards, things like that. And what I want to do is kind of show you and talk about some more concepts behind how to more or less translate what hopefully the worship team has rehearsed well and arranged well. Because we know, like we said yesterday, garbage in, just louder garbage out. Not much, there's only certain things we can fix, and we'll see some of those things. So anyway, that's kind of the crux of today's presentation. What should I be paying attention to? What do I really need to be working on? Am I feeding back a little bit? You want to turn me down? It feels like I am. What you will not learn today. You will not learn exactly what mic, speaker, console, none of that stuff is going to help you to get a better sound. I don't care if you have Personas' new little cool thing I'm going to show you here in a minute, or if you have a flagship Yamaha PM1D. $2,000, $180,000. Is that right, Randy? How much are those things now? Not that much. They used to be. $1.25. Yeah. I wish they were $1.25. I'll take two. Anyway, it doesn't matter because, guys, at the end of the day, it's here. And if you don't hear it, it doesn't matter how many knobs I show you or how many frequencies I talk about. You have to learn to hear it. And to learn to hear it is like a guitar player. He's got to strum a G at some point to be able to recognize it's a G, right? So, other things you won't learn, exactly what frequency to cut to get that killer vocal sound. Or any technical mumbo jumbo like cut 600s, 5.2 dB at a 0.6 Q octave to get an acoustic guitar that's just amazing. Though that's kind of halfway true. But what you will learn today, what to put your attention on in the mix. What am I really needing to be paying attention to? How to hear the junk. The junk is what separates the men from the boys. When you learn to hear the stuff that's in your way and you get that out, then you're going to be able to have clearer sound on everything. And we saw some of that yesterday, and I'll get to that towards the end of this class again today. How to clean up your mix and carve holes. Everybody knows that if we have 4 cellos, it's going to be hard to hear all 4 of them clearly. So we've got to carve some holes in some of them to do things. Same way if we have 13 acoustic guitar players. Whoever thought that was a good idea? Well, I guess the Eagles did really well with that for a while on some of their unplugged stuff, but anyway. And then this one's kind of a big one. What order to attack problem sounds? Because like we did, no, we didn't talk about this yet. How many guys, we're going to do some of the rewind since we're taping here. How many guys get more than 5 minutes to sound check on Sunday morning? I see 2 or 3 hands out of, what's here, 100 and some people maybe. There's a difference, let's say this, between sound check, which is what the worship leader knows, and that's the generic Kleenex for our industry, if you will, Kleenex, Xerox, you know. We call this whole thing called starting the service before we do it our check, sound check. That's not what it is. There needs to be 3 elements, if not 4 to it. You need to do a line check that is us checking whether the kick drum is plugged in and it works and it routes to the correct monitor. We do that before the band gets there, hopefully, right? I don't ever want the band to be waiting on me to try and technically troubleshoot something. Then we do a sound check, and I call this part all about me. That's the part where it's like, if the worship leader, and I'll talk to him and say, if you'll give me 10 minutes of our 30 minutes, your 20 minutes that I give you back will be way more productive. And keep into the 10 minutes. Don't spend 8.5 minutes on the kick drum. They go, okay, snare please, because you're not going to get through it. So if you got 10 minutes and you got 16 inputs, divide it out and figure you got, 30, 40 seconds in input. Right? Can you do that? By the end of the class you will. You'll feel like you can anyway. And then the third component would be the rehearsal. Now, how many people start with the third thing and skip the other 2? pretty much everybody does that, because the worship leaders assume that we've already practiced our song. I don't have a guitar at home that I can practice my song on. My song, or my instrument is the soundboard, and I can't play it until I have music coming through it, right? So therefore, if I don't have a chance or a second or two, 30 or 4 seconds, quite honest, would be better sometimes to just have him strum his guitar outside of the song or the downbeat. Anyway, you guys get my point. I'm just kind of rambling on that. Okay, so here's the thing. When we mix, nope, there we go. When we mix, what are we listening for? I want you guys to ask yourself 2 questions. What's the most important thing in the mix? Interactive class. What's the most important thing in the mix in a worship environment? Lead vocals. Yep. Because if we don't hear the words, it's kind of pointless. Yeah, right? Kind of doesn't amplify what we're doing. Now, I'm going to get to a point. I don't have a worship song today to show this, but I wish I did. But there's a point when we talk about the art side of mixing, when I make the vocals go behind things and I pull them back so that you guys can hear yourselves more. And that's the part that we'll get into that's more about playing the room with your instrument and less about playing the sound that we think we should be making and looking at what people are doing and when they engage and when they don't. Do we have control of that? Is that our fault if people aren't worshiping? It's not our fault, but we can enhance it, right? If it doesn't sound good and people are going, they're not going to be free to worship, right? If it sounds good and things are pleasant and moving and the vibe, if you will, coming off the music on the stage is translating into the house, then we're playing our instrument well. The guitar player was playing their instrument well, right? Okay. The next question, can I hear everything? Quite honestly, if you answer those 2 questions, 90% of your audience is going to be happy with your mix. Because most of the audience doesn't listen to stuff the way that we do. We listen to things, hopefully, this way. When I think about mixing a song, I take a snapshot of where I'm going, and I have a picture of what I want that song to sound like. And then I try to figure out what I've got to do to get there. So we're constantly listening to kick, snare, hat, bass, electric, acoustic, right? They're just looking up at the stage and seeing a guitar player playing his heart out and not hearing it. They don't care that the snare sounds great, right? Follow me? Yeah? So, what is critical listening? It really, in my opinion, is this. Like I said, it's not the classical side of critical listening. It's what's happening inside the mix. There are left, right, up, down, front, back pieces to a mix and how things fit in there and whether the thing is out front and too loud or whether it's in back because maybe there's not enough high frequency on it. It sounds like it's behind the mix, yeah? Follow that stuff? Learn to hear the subtleties. If you're reaching up and you're turning a knob like this on Sunday, you didn't hear it. You thought you did. Much like when they ask for more me and you haven't got to the knob yet. The phantom knob turn, right? You haven't got there. Not like we ever do that on purpose. Maybe. But you know, they'll say, hey, can I have more me? And you haven't got there. And they're like, oh, that's great. Well, what happened at that point? They listened better, right? They just don't know that they need to do that sometimes. And sometimes, quite honestly, this is a sidetrack, but sometimes the best thing for them is to not say more me, but teach them to go, what do they need less of so they can hear more of them, right? A lot of times, we talked about this yesterday, a lot of times you'll have, say, 4 tenor vocalists that are all singing 4-part unison. That's an arrangement problem we can't fix. But there's 4 guys singing out of one monitor wedge, you're going to have a really hard time having any of them hear each other. The fix is have them sing different parts. But if that's not true, then we've got to try to isolate them with some EQ to kind of get each part to be able to hurt a little bit, right? Okay? This is critical, guys. Get down on the stage. Because I don't know how many guys I've seen park their little behinds right here and never move and then don't communicate well. So if you don't have an idea of what your acoustic guitar sounds like when you're strumming it, what you expect it to sound like, how can you know where you're going, you know? I mean, you can get in your car and want to go to Walmart. Well, that's not a good example because there's 150 Walmarts. Okay, if you're going to go to Walmart, you're going to get in your car and you have a pretty good idea what turns you're going to take to get to whichever one of 700 you're going to find within a 5-mile radius. But that's the same idea, right? If you're going to go somewhere, you kind of got to know where you're going. So therefore, if I don't know what I want my acoustic to sound like, how do I drive my car to get to that sound, right? So you got to be taking snapshots of things. When I first started mixing sound, I was a drummer, not a musician. Sorry, drummers. And I got kind of thrown into sound. It's a whole long God story that's a very cool story. If you ever want to know, I'll tell you. But God more or less impressed upon me that's what I needed to be doing and not doing drumming. And I was like, okay, if that's true, then I really have to listen to music differently than I currently listen to it. Because I currently listen to music going, yeah, that's a great groove. Yeah, listen to that. Not how those things are interacting inside the music, right? Our job is not really to love the groove and love what's happening with the music. It's more to find out how to get the spaces for those things to fit in there, right? Try different mics and positions. This is killer. This is the studio guy's trick. We can turn knobs all day long. If the mic's in the wrong spot on the instrument, it's not going to help you, right? And I'll show you some examples of that later. But simply put, really, it's just called paying attention to the details, figuring out what you want to do, where you want to go. If you're hitting the gas or the brake, if you're hitting the left turn signal or the right, kind of know where you want to go. Let's take a little poll. What are you guys mixing? Everybody that's mixing kind of the Chris Tomlin typical rock kind of thing that's going on now, raise your hand. Good portion. People doing the orchestra type thing or the big praise kind of thing, yeah, a few of those. I don't see a lot of hands, so either you guys aren't interacting or you're mixing things I don't know about. So give me some ideas if you're not mixing those two styles.
Acoustic guitar led like Shane and Shane.
Okay, great. So kind of an acoustic rockish thing.
Acoustic
Yeah.
rockish.
Yeah, great. Okay.
Latin.
Latin. Cool. Who said that? Yeah, right on. Cool. Latin. How many inputs? Everybody that's mixing 16 or less, raise your hand. 25% of their 16 or more. Another 50%. And 32 or more. The last 20% or so. Okay, cool. So for the most part, everybody's kind of in the 16, 24 range of how many inputs you're running, right? What kind of consoles? Analog console people? Good portion. Digital console people? Somehow I don't know what it does, but I turn the knob people? Right on. So yeah, mostly analog, I guess. People wanting to go digital? Yeah? Everybody? We've seen some of the bells and whistles. So yeah. What kind of speakers do we got? $500 or less, do you even know? Like, are you guys dealing with like cool looking space age ones like that, or are they the little speaker on a stick or giant line arrays? Space age? Speaker on a stick, little plastic jobs on the poles, right? Big center clusters? Yeah? Line arrays? Yeah? Great, okay, cool. So it's across the board. Here's the point with this. Same thing I said at the very beginning. It doesn't matter, guys. If you've got good gear, and I'm not talking great, we can have great gear. I have seen guys on $500,000 systems blow it. But I've seen some guys pull off stuff out of, a speaker and a stick and a tiny little soundboard. You just go, gosh, it sounds great. What's the key to the equation there? Good EQ. Good EQ via the ears. Once you see some of the tricks I'll show you today, I want you to walk away from this seminar going, okay, I heard it. I heard what he was talking about. Now all I got to do is go practice and turn some knobs and try to hear it. Okay? Fundamentals in any mix. This is a key element for me. If you've listened to my mixes, you'll know this. The fundamental for me, there's three of them. First fundamental, rhythm. The rhythm is key to the modern music. Latin. If you don't have that kind of funk stuff going on, it's not got a Latin feel to it. If you're doing a Chris Tomlin song and you don't have that kick drum doing the 4 on the floor thing, it doesn't feel right. You can have the kick drum sound like this, and it's not going to engage anybody in the room. When that kick drum gets some fullness to it, it feels good. So a key element, rhythm. The next one, which is probably equal or greater, is the vocal. See the little shing there? The vocal, because the vocal is, again, the key piece. Here's the deal. Remember I said, what are you going to focus on? The two things you're going to focus on when you start your sound check, and you have 5 minutes because we've just started and we haven't taken our worship leader to Starbucks to help him understand that we need more than him just starting to sing the song, is you're going to focus on your kick, your snare, and your lead vocal. If you nail those 3 elements and get them sounding good, you have more time now to work on all the rest of the melody instruments that fit in underneath it and surround it. Because as long as you hear those elements, here's an example. When you're in your car next time, take your stereo, turn it down all the way on, you know, whatever your local Christian radio station is. Turn it up real slow until you first hear something. Until you just, I hear something. It will be the vocal and the snare and maybe some of the kick. I guarantee you, you will not hear the melody instruments at that point. So would that be arguably to be said that those are the loudest things in the mix? Yeah, give or take. I mean, it's all very, very close, but perceptually, those things need to be as hot as possible. Right? Okay, let's talk about the space in the mix. When we're talking about the mix, I'm talking about 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz, our EQ. I'm not talking about the fader positions. I'm not talking about the volume level. I'm talking about how things are fitting into that space. Here's my example of this, and this is just the way my brain works. Who can read that line for me? Sure, if you stare long enough, maybe you can, but I know what it says. It says 10 hit pop knees on. Exactly what it says. I know that. Because it's my mix, it's my line, it's how my stuff fits together. What language am I speaking? Who knows, right? Watch this. If all I do, I'm not going to remove any letters. I'm not going to delete anything that the band, quote unquote, is doing from the stage. I'm just going to find the right space for those things. And I'm just kind of putting them where we expect them to be as English-speaking people and how it works. So it's getting a little more clear as we get things arranged, right? Think of the mix as a line. My statement's not as important as the concept. What happened there, guys? I just moved things where they belonged. All right?
You made space for each piece.
I made space for each piece. Yeah, good stuff. Yeah, right? So obviously, once the letters were in the right space, everything became clear. Could you read it before? All the elements were there, but you couldn't read it? Excuse me, everything has a place on that line or in the mix. Too much in one place made it very hard to read. That's why you couldn't figure out some of those words because it didn't even look like English. We've heard those sounds before, haven't we? But the point really is to separate your sounds as much as possible. You need to make space for it, okay? Anybody know what the fundamental frequency chart is? You guys have seen this guy, I'm sure. It's a little hard to read on this screen, but the lines are basically saying, you know, French horn, trumpet, trombone, bassoon. We have frequencies on the left to the right. I don't like this chart because it doesn't apply to the kind of music I'm mixing for the most part, but the concept is true. That the fundamental frequency, which would be like, let's take a guitar player. Give me a guitar player. Who's a guitar player? Right? Okay. Name a chord. Any chord. Don't care.
E.
Do you know the notes in the E chord?
Yeah.
What notes are in the E?
E, G sharp, B.
E, G sharp, B. If I were to remove the E and you just played the G sharp and the B, is it still an E chord?
Part of one.
Part of one, right? But is it right? And I'm not a musician, so I'm asking. If the E is gone, there's no longer a fundamental.
Correct.
Right? So I could take the G sharp and the B away and still have an E. I mean, I have the E, obviously, but it's not an E chord at that point, but it is an E. So the E is the fundamental. Does that make sense? All instruments kind of have a fundamental range where they fit, and that's what that chart is showing. But notice how wide that chart is. I mean, you're talking about even bass, which is the very bottom line, is like 90 to 400. Well, a bass guitar does way more below 90, of course, right? We felt it shake in the room last night with Abe Laboriel, right? And it does way more above that. But the fundamental stuff that you need to think about and concentrate on the bass guitar is in that range. Okay, so, and as soon as you hear an instrument, you can say it. If I said to you electric guitar, where do you think it is? You have to tell me a number. Is it lows, mids, highs? Mid to mid highs, right? Okay. There's highs, especially in distortion stuff. You've got all that crunchy stuff going on, and you've got some lows. But if you accentuate it and you do the quote-unquote smiley face that a lot of us do that sounds cool on instruments, it gets a lot of lows and a lot of highs. Well, I've just taken out all the fundamental of that, and then when I do that to another instrument, another electric guitar or a keyboard, and I try to put those two things together, well, now there's nothing of the fundamental in there, right? So now we've taken a G sharp and a B and added it to something else, and we still don't have the fundamental of it to create the actual E chord. Follow? Yeah? Okay. So here's me again. I try to think more in pictures than I do in numbers. For those of us who want numbers, there they are. 63, 80, 500, there's your 16Ks. For those of us who know how to run our stereos, lows, mids, highs, right? You follow what's going on here? If we talk about the kick drum, where is it? The kick drum's on the low frequencies, right? Fundamental, I mean, there's some high stuff. You want that click on the kick drum that's way up here. but it's not a fundamental. And if I didn't have the kick drum clicking and have a sharp attack to it, you're still going to know it's a kick drum. If the kick drum only sounds like this, it doesn't feel like a kick drum. So the fundamental is missing, right? This isn't rocket science. This is just kind of a wake-up call a little bit. The bass guitar, fits in the same range. But notice I've kind of made the picture kind of large, and it does. I mean, I made it a little larger. There's not really too much 16K going on a bass guitar. But for the most part, again, the majority of my bass is right in there with my kick. Okay? I'll show you how that fits together here later. We're just going to go a little fast so we get into hearing some things. Snare drum, it's not quite that big, but it's pretty close. 500 to 4K, right? So it's all in that mid-rangey stuff. We've got some sparkle on it. Our snare sound, our sound of the snare is way up high. We don't really have much down there by the kick drum, so the snare kind of isolates itself, right? Cymbals, no big deal. They're way up there, fairly high. Now we're getting in trouble. We're starting to get some stuff occluding, covering up, getting in the way. I've now got my electric guitar in a similar range to where some of my bass guitar stuff is. Well, let's add an acoustic. The acoustic's kind of fighting those cymbals a little bit. We get a little bit of vocal going on in there. Starting to get pretty much too much going on in one spot, right? So at that point, that's the mixes we've all heard and seen and done, and it's kind of everything's there, and you can kind of, you stare at the guy playing, you can kind of tell that it's happening, but it's not quite there. So our option at this point, without touching EQ, is to basically just raise something up louder. So I just raised Chris's voice up, and now he's in front of the mix. So that's that mix that sounds like everything's back here, and I got this vocal way up front, and it sounds just bad. You know what I'm saying? Everything should fit inside and fit together, right? So this is the trick. Let's burn that kick drum up a little bit and isolate it down so that our fundamental is the focus of the kick, right? If you guys have listened to the kick I'm doing in the other room, it's big, it's full, you feel it. You also perceive it with the top end, but if you were to characterize it, you're feeling it. You're having the energy from it, right? So let's do the same thing. Oops. Same thing to the bass guitar. You see it shrink down there a little bit? I'm kind of focusing in on the fundamentals. So even in doing that, I've put my bass guitar a little lower than the kick drum, if you will. Don't think about my height, it's more about the space this way. So I made my bass guitar wrap around it. I mean, Abe's bass last night, there were points when he was hitting notes that were just making my pants just vibrate. And it was way cool. If you didn't like that, I'm sorry, but you can't be slapping that bass like he was and not do that to me. So we take Chris's voice and we kind of shrink it down a little bit, and we get rid of some of that low energy that's just kind of the the muffly stuff on a mic, and we kind of focus it in a little bit. And we just kind of go through everybody here and we do that. We tuck back the acoustic guitar. You see it kind of hiding in there a little bit. We do the same to the, I don't know what I just took out there. Snare, yep. So we focused him in. Do the same. We kind of tuck the electric in, and see what I'm doing. I'm kind of focusing in on all the fundamentals of this stuff here, right? The cymbals. And so now look at that mix. That's kind of where you're driving your car, guys. Now, if you do that in that only, it's going to sound pretty bad. Because all of these instruments are multi-timbral, there's all these frequencies happening up and down around it. But that's the thought process I really want you guys to grasp at this point, is I need to be focusing on that. And I'm going to show you a technique in a minute called sweeping that we did yesterday in class. But I boost an EQ and I sweep it around until I hear something I don't like. That's not the point. The point is you're finding something you don't like, getting that out of the way so that you're focusing on these type of fundamentals, okay? And we got that keyboard that all bets are off on. Who knows what they're going to give us out of that thing. so I just usually, and my graphic is completely correct on this, I usually just tuck it back far enough until I hear moments that I want to feature. And that's a key. Here's a real neat trick in the mix. If you've got a lot of instruments on stage, okay, and most of us were in the 16 to 24 inputs range, so that's a good deal of instruments. Unless you've got 14 drum mics, you've got a decent amount of vocals or instruments going on up there. If you can't get your mix clean, if you can't get isolated like this, pick 2 or 3 of the most important things and feature them. And then on maybe the next song, you might change that, or maybe on the chorus or something, you'll do it. Listen to records. And don't listen like, hey, cool, I'm moving along, I like this song, I like what it's talking about. I couldn't tell you half the lyrics to the songs I mix, because I don't listen to it. I get in trouble with my wife, because she talks to me, and sometimes I don't hear her. And I say, well, honey, your voice sounds great.
Hey, I got a couch if you need it.
He has a couch if I need it right now. No, my wife we have a better relationship with that. And I don't have her on an amplified system all the time that I can't EQ. So. What is it with sound guys, man? We have like the crappiest stereos, don't we? I mean, we have great systems at church, but like my home stereo is like a Walmart job. Anyway, and it's not strapped to her with a mic on it. So the point here, sorry, I lost my train of thought. Keyboard, right, okay, so the pick three kind of thing is what I call it. Think about the song, think about the arrangement. If your mix looks like that and sounds like that all day long with all the songs, we failed again. Because quite honestly, there's songs that are led from the keyboard, songs that are led from the acoustic. Does it change on the verse and chorus? Lots of times it does. How many sound guys go, oh, sounds good, cool. You got your little iPod and start texting or whatever. I've done it. I've been very guilty of doing it. The music, because the band knows this, we don't always know this. The music has movements. You guys remember critical listening in school when you had to listen to the records and the teacher made you go, did you hear the blah, 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 blah button? No, I didn't. Because I didn't care at that point. But the more I've really got into mixing, the more I don't think about EQ, and the more I do think about what's happening musically and how the kick and the bass are relating to one another. Kick and the bass are one instrument, guys. Yep. They're one instrument. And when it's working, and those two guys are playing well together, and I've got the kick surrounded by the bass, it feels right. And when they're grooving and they're locking in on that downbeat and they're just sitting back on the groove, if we're not translating it and the kick's here and the bass is here or here, it just sounds like they're not playing the part well. Follow me on that? Yeah? Mm-hmm. So anyway, we'll move on. This is a little sidetrack, but it's kind of important. We talked about this yesterday. I told you I'd give it to you. Which mic should I use? I'm not going to tell you which mic. There's a lot of great mics. I'm a very big Shure mic fan, so I know a lot of their mics. I put a KSM32 on a guitar amp all the time. On the stage down there, I'm double micing the guitar amp, but I'm not using a KSM32 and a 57 at the same time. What I'm doing, I'll let you hear in just a second. What I'm doing is on some songs I'll use the 32 for this big, larger-than-life sounding guitar, and then I'll feature the 57 on the verse maybe because he's doing a chunka, 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 chunka. And it makes that go to a different spot in the mix without me having to EQ, right? So I'm playing my soundboard. There's points when it'll come bum, 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 and I'll go and change the mix to a different mic because I want a different sound. Here's a trick. This is, again, like I said, a little side note, but magic spot, okay, guitar, if you guys don't know, this is 32, it's a side address mic. Most microphones you sing into like this. No, no, no. A side address mic is a studio mic. The diaphragm is in there not this way, but this way. So, right? So you sing into it this way, like a studio mic. That's why, the first time I showed this slide, I was like, why are you micing that little latch at the bottom there? I'm not. The sound's actually coming out of the amp this way into the mic, right? But if you see my little Photoshop stuff there, I've kind of tried to show you what the speaker looks like. The magic spot on a guitar amp is right there. It's the intersection between the cone and the dust cover, the little dome, if you will. Okay? That's a Beta 56, which is just a really cool version of a Beta 57 in many ways. It has that little bend in it, which is great so that people don't trip over the mic stand when it's sticking out the other way. Same idea here. I didn't spend as much time on that Photoshop, so it's not as good. Here's the trick. This thing I'm going to show you now, mic comparison, is a Beta 56. We're going to hear it. And what I did is I had, the mics are on the same amp with the same guitar player playing, and I'll let you hear one and I'll let you hear the other one. So you'll see what happens here. Okay, now we'll go to 32. Hear it? No different. Same EQ, actually flat EQ when I recorded that. Two different mics, two different sounds. Which one sounds better? You already jumped to the point. He said, for what? They both sound good. They both sound different, right? This one, a little narrower and kind of a little more in your face. This one, pretty big. Yeah, great. Good for a chorus. The second mic was good for a chorus. Now you can use, because I'm capturing all that, I can kind of EQ some things and maybe pull some different things out of them. But for the most part, you're exactly right. What I would do is I would probably use my 56 on a verse where I wanted to kind of sit back or maybe be a little more articulate, but then there, bum, 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 I'm gonna go dun, 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 and then hit that 32, and the guitar sound just gets huge sounding, right? Yeah, okay. So, quite honestly, I mean, we're talking, I think, 100 and some bucks versus 400 bucks, so it's quite a bit of difference. Choose one, you'll get the good sounds out of it. Some of the songs I've been doing, like on Sarah's set, I pretty much stayed on the 57 the whole time because it just was working for me, right? And I wasn't as familiar with her music and where I might do a change. So, is that important for us to be familiar with how the song's arranged? Yes, thank you. Don't say no to that. Yeah, got a question?
Would you, if you're more limited,
Yeah.
but you've got a KSM32, you know, to have more ability within that mix, would you recommend cutting the lows to not cloud the lower frequencies on a KSM?
He's paying attention.
Or would you?
That's exactly the point, yes. I use 2 mics because I can.
Yeah.
If you can't and you have the ability to have 1 mic on a guitar, I would probably choose the 56 or a 57. Everybody has a 57 in their mic locker somewhere, I'm sure. 79 bucks, you can get one if not. Because that sound of the 57, 56, whatever, is more usable and more versatile. The bigger sound is cool and fun, but oftentimes we don't have the time to use it. So yes, I would not be able to use that 32 sound as often because I need it to cut into the mix more. So I'm using that big sound like that. Obviously you heard that low end going on it, right? It's going to be in the way of my bass guitar. Okay? So let's talk about mic positions. Here's a little line 6 amp with a 57, beta 57 on it. So you see I'm pointing right there at the little speaker, right where I told you to do it. Good sounding spot on an amp. Let's listen to it. Huge difference. Now, did any of you guys go to Lincoln's class earlier where he was doing some of this? I moved it 5-6 inches there. He was moving it 3 inches, and it was pretty stark difference. Here's application for that. I would never use that mic position, would I? That sounded horrible to me. Unless you have this guitar player. How many guys know this guy? Here's my little guitar amp right here. And when he sets his tone that he has worked years on, and yes, I'm using air quotes on guitar tone, he plugs in his awesome Strat into his giant pedal board of who knows what all it does, plugs it into his amp, and he goes strum, and he starts adjusting it from here. Where's the sound coming out of that sucker? So his ankle sounds great to the amps. It doesn't sound any good to me. If I was going to mic that guitar amp, where's the best place to mic it? Right here. Right here, where he's hearing it. And it probably does sound good there. The problem is if I got any other instruments up there, it's not going to hear anything. It's not going to hear the amp, right? So I tell guitar players to get down and pray about their tone. So get down there, and literally it's a joke, but you got to get down there in front of your amp and be listening to what's happening out of that amp, where I'm going to be putting my mic. Because quite honestly, a guitar amp does sound better on 11 or 12 or whatever you can turn it to. It does, especially if it's a tube amp. You got to turn it up to get those tubes hot to sing, right? Anybody disagree? Does an amp sound good on tube? Yeah, actually it does when it's in a room like this, but I want the tone. That's the whole point, because garbage in, garbage out. If he's got a bad tone in, I've just got to do a ton of surgery to make it sound even remotely good. If he gives me a great tone out, then I can just reproduce it. A lot of times I just say, hey man, back off, I just make it louder. Anyway. Critical listening is not just about the mix. It's about the whole room. This is the next level. Have I even taught you guys how to turn a knob yet? You seeing some concepts I'm going after here though? When I'm doing sound down there, I'm obviously running it louder than you guys probably are allowed to run it on Sunday morning. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I have that freedom, and I wish that everybody would allow us to do what we need, because quite honestly, I won't say all the time, but quite honestly, a lot of the times the way to fix our mic is just to be able to turn it up a little bit, or to turn down the stage volume. Because the problem we're fighting is not so much bad EQ or bad technique or no sound check. It's the fact that I've got a monitor wedge blasting to the back wall, off the ceiling, and back into the room. So the path of sound travels 30-some feet before it gets back to you. And my nice little whatever speaker right here is 5 feet away, so I'm hearing 2 arrival times. And so it just sounds like, it sounds like a, as opposed to a nice sharp attack, right? So we don't have time for the whole turn the stage volume down, but obviously ear monitors are better for the front of house guy. Musicians may not like them as much. Suck it up. Did I say it out loud? So here's the deal. This is the whole room thought for me is this. Let's talk about volume versus SPL. Anybody know what the difference is? Is there a difference? I think it depends on who you ask. SPL, sound pressure level. Sound pressure level is measurable. We can buy a little 40-some odd dollar from Radio Shack. I've got one on my iPhone now for 20 bucks that's pretty close to accurate. I call them kind of keep you honest meters. You kind of need to run it so you know where you're at. And we'll get into what those numbers are in a minute of what's good and what's bad. But it's measurable. If you say to me it's too loud, I can say it's the same exactly as it was last week. Volume, though, on the other hand, is perceived. And therefore, it's open for interpretation or misinterpretation or attitude. I think Rajesh Latouris would argue with me on that, but I think interpretation and attitude can kind of go hand in hand in this argument, because when it's too loud, it's not necessarily an SPL issue, it's a you don't like it this loud. I mean, let's see, where am I going next here? Yeah, okay. So here's the deal. Let's talk about this for a second, then we'll talk about the volume versus SPL. If you have an SPL meter, there are certain settings you need to use. Out of the box, the Radio Shack meter comes in C weighting with a fast response. It's wrong. It's not what our ears are. It's not measuring the frequencies that are going to hurt our ears, let's say it that way. The right settings are dBA, not dBc. If you tell me, man, I run 95 on Sunday, that means nothing. It's completely a pointless thing. It means nothing, because A versus C is very different. It's quite honestly about 10 dB different in a rock environment. So make sure your meter is set to A, not to C. Here's the deal. dBA weight, slow response. Write these down, because when you buy your $40 meter, if you don't, and you don't do this and you call me and you tell me how loud you're running it, I'm going to tell you to go back and read the presentation again. And if you can set the range, you need to do that too, 80 to 110, because that's kind of the range that we're going to run things in. Okay? Everybody know who OSHA is? They're sometimes our friends, sometimes our worst enemy. And he says mostly our enemy. They have done some good things for us and put some things into practice that make us make sense. So here's their little chart. That chart to me says, okay, if I have a hour-and-a-half long service on Sunday morning, and during that service I have 30 minutes of music, let's see, 0.5 hours per day. Ha! Yes, I can run 110 dBA weighting. 110 is pretty loud. Every 6 dB is twice as loud. Most of the sessions I've been running down there have been max 100. So 110 could be hurting pretty bad. Here's the problem I have with this chart. This chart was made for the work environment, the factories. This is, I'm exposed for 30 minutes a day, every day of my life, in the work field for 105 dB that Mr. OSHA came and said, man, that machine's running at 105, we got to turn it down to get you further away, get you ear protection. It doesn't totally apply to us for that very reason, especially when we're talking about our speedometer. That's what I call this, right? How fast I can go, how loud I can go. That says to me that my car can drive 110 dB, A weighted, and I'm not going to hurt anybody. That means the speed limit's that loud, right? Follow me on this? It's not cool. It's not. We've all walked into shows that are just too flippin' loud, and it's just not enjoyable at that point. Again, that's me for you guys, sorry. Here's the point with this chart for me. I'm going to tell you that a good full sounding room is 90 to 95 dB. When you're up into 90, 95 A weighted, it's pretty loud. Most of my softer stuff in the big room has been 95, 90 to 95. But here's the trick. I'm using the subwoofers to generate energy that makes you perceive that it's louder than it is. Okay? So let's move on for a second. We're going to talk about the sweeping EQ thing that I was talking about yesterday. Everybody know it's kind of hard to read here. The top is a high pass filter. We talked about this yesterday. That means anything below where that button is set is going to be deleted out of the mix. So that one on typical Mackie folks, Allen and Heath, kind of smaller mixer folks in here, raise your hands. Yeah, a good chunk of you. You just have a button usually that just says high pass, or it looks like that little line, or it says HPF on it. The bummer with that is most of those guys, when they design that filter, were only caring about turning off the really low frequency stuff. It's not a musical filter to me. It doesn't get rid of stuff that's more usable. The next knob down there, and I'm kind of taking this down into the lowest common denominator. A lot of the newer mixers will have more bands of EQ than this, but we have a high frequency that's fixed, maybe at 10K or something, so we can kind of add some air to things. The next one is a sweepable filter. That's called a parametric filter. And I have a frequency, and I have a gain knob on it. And what that means, I'll show you in the next slide if you're not following yet, is this. Highlighted them in yellow and green there. So see the yellow, that's the frequency, okay? So what I want you to learn to do, and I'm going to show you and let you hear in just a second, is I want you to boost the snot out of some gain on your mid-range, okay? And when I did that, my little arrow, the yellow one, is pointing at 2.5K, so I kind of created a boost in the EQ there, right? Then what I want you to do is notice the yellow one moving. I'm moving the frequency down, and I'm moving it back up. And while I'm doing that, I'm listening. And what I'm listening for is junk. I'm listening for something that just makes me go, I don't like that. That just doesn't sound natural. It doesn't sound good. Something's funny about that. You may, when you're sweeping that, go, ooh, I kind of like that. Take a picture of it. Remember, you might come back to that later if you have the ability to do more parametric filters than just one. For all intents and purposes and argument's sake right now, we're going to try to concentrate on one. And then what I want you to do is I want you to return that, or okay, sweep it back down and find, oh, there it is right there. That sounds horrible to me. Then I want you to cut it out, go back and listen to the original instrument with that gain returned back. You follow? You see what the knobs are doing and what's happening in there? Listen to it for a second and then just cut it out. Take a little bit out, okay? I turned it up a lot so I could get my ear to latch onto it, hear it. I moved it around. You've heard me doing this some, as they'll throw me somebody's mic or something I haven't heard. You'll kind of hear me EQing things. Do that, people. I would way rather you turn a knob and take 10 or 15 seconds to hear something that doesn't sound right now and fix it, and then I'll forget about it, especially from a typical person sitting in the audience. They're going to go, it didn't sound good for a second. Oh, there it is. Okay, oh, cool, sounds great. But if all you're doing is kind of making a little choice going, I think that John said something about turning 500. No, I didn't, and you won't hear me say that for that reason. You need to hear something, because this acoustic guitar might cut at 500 to make it sound good. This acoustic guitar might take a cut at 600. And we're talking about music and how those things fit together, so you got to listen to it. You got to find it. I don't do a lot of the boost and cut anymore because I've kind of learned where some of those things are. But this is the trick, and this is how I learned to hear what I need to get rid of. Okay? Moving along, all things considered, can we fix it all? No, sadly we can't, because of what I said earlier. Garbage in, garbage out. If I've got old Mildred the cow right here, farm cow, milk cow, not the bad singer, but if I've got that cow right there, and I have a $150,000 sound system and a $125,000 soundboard and a $5,000 mic in front of that cow, and she says moo, what's it going to sound like? A really good moo, right? So I mean, I don't know if you want a cow in your mix, but you know, maybe you do, and maybe for the children's program that works. I don't know. Anyway, you get the point. So no matter what I just taught you with this whole sweeping and moving and things relate, if they're not giving you something good from the stage, sometimes we can't fix it. I've heard this argument, well, yeah, she's not a great singer, but just put some more verb on her and it'll be great. No, it won't. Because now what we've done is we've taken somebody who's off pitch, put more signal on her by having her excite the reverb and putting that reverb into the mix where we can hear the reverb, and now we have more width in the mix that's out of pitch. The best thing to do with her, quite honestly, is take her mic, unplug it, throw it under the riser, and she thinks she's on. I have done that. Practical outcomes. How do we apply what we've learned today? Obviously, critically listen to each input. We need to have the time to do that, right? Visualize the space for it in the mix. Don't get lost here. I'm going to show you this. Don't feel like I'm just going, oh, okay, see ya. We're going to hear this. Visualize it for the space for it in the mix. Try to isolate the things via good EQ choices. Okay? I don't want you to go, he just said take the junk out and I'm done. That's the best place to start. Get the junk out of the way so the whole instrument can shine through. Then we come back on a B choice when we have time, more than 32 seconds on an input, and we listen to some stuff. Remember, we swept it and we go, oh, I kind of like that, but that's not what John said, get rid of. Get rid of the bad and go, I remember there was something up there in that higher mid-range that I liked. I might go in and boost a little of that, maybe. We might listen to it in the mix, right? Here is the point of all points. Know your audience and mix for them. It's All About Me. I like that song. You know, it's all about me, jeez, right? I'm not singing, but you know that song. But it's not about us. It's not about what I want, how good I want it to sound. If you know your audience and you know what they want, you gotta kind of stay in that range. You can't be driving 95, 100 dB if everybody in the room has gray hair, because they are gonna perceive the volume as it being too loud, okay? If you're mixing for the youth service, you can run a little louder. If you're at CMS and we're having a lot of fun and we're able to have a huge sound system like we do in there and it's fun, we can turn it up a little more. But sadly, the people who pay the tithes and pay for our sound system, if they don't like it, we do have to pay attention to that a little bit, as much as we don't want to. You know, sometimes it's like, no, it sounds great, go away, you're bothering me. Maybe it doesn't, and here's the point with that. I was at Lincoln Roosters Church, Bayside, for a few years and was their tech director, and we had a computer that controlled our sound system. We had multiple speakers all over the place. And I had my Keep Me Honest meter right there, and every Sunday we ran at the same volume. Kyle was at Bayside, we ran at 95 and we didn't go much louder than that. That's what we established as our volume. And I knew every week if I'm looking at my meter, I'm where I need to be. 3 or 4 weeks in a row, I had people come up going, dude, it's just really loud. I'm like, go away. It's the same as it's always been. Volume boy, go learn what sounds good and doesn't. Here's the problem. What we didn't know is our computer kind of woke up stupid one day and decided to turn up that speaker way over there that I never go back there and listen to. It was about 2-3 times as loud. And so one day, after 3 or 4 people have come and talked to me, I just started to walk around and sound check. This is the don't just stand at the soundboard part of the speech. Go walk around and see where the dead spots are and see what's happening. And see if you have one of these exploded systems where there's a computer. Anytime there's a computer control, it's going to do what we ask it to do until there's some lightning or something involved, and then it might do whatever it wants to do. But I finally kind of walked up here one day, and the band's playing, and I'm kind of walking up, and I get in front of that speaker, and I'm like, oh my gosh! And it was huge. It was really loud. And so the fix was, or literally we went up and checked in the closet on the little thing, and all the lights are like red and freaking out on this thing, and we're like, oh, okay, that's bad. And we replaced a piece of gear and everybody's happy. So your meter may not be lying to you. It's telling you the truth, but it's not listening over there. So you got to get, if you've noticed, there's a few times I'll run away from the soundboard and go listen out in the middle of the room for a minute, because where I'm standing up there in the big room, I'm in a bass trap, so I'm hearing way more bass than you guys are. If you want to have some fun and you want some more bass, come sit where I am. It's pretty huge. Okay. He says, okay, so I can turn the bass up more? Yeah. All right, freedom. All right, back to just to touch that again, Tech Training 101, that's my website. All of this is on there somewhere. There's a lot of things. We talked about personal ear monitors for a second. I've got 3 articles out there on how to get those good. There's some of this EQ stuff. Let's do this. I'd like to have some fun. So let's talk about what PreSonus has let me borrow today for a second. This is, it's called the Studio Live 1642. Brand new Rick here, shipping next month, I hear. Yes, is that right? Street price on this thing, $2,000, guys. It's a digital mixer, 16 inputs. If you can fit on 16, a lot of us said we could. Here's the coolness of it. Typical mixer. I have a gain at the top. I have, I can't read everything right here. Let me come over here. My aux sends, so I have 6 aux sends, up, 7, 8. I have 2 effects processors too, so I can do 6 monitor mixes, 2 effects processors. This is not level meters like you would think. It's what they call the fat channel, which is showing me what my inputs are doing. So much like your EQ, which is right here, I have gain on my EQ and frequency. I don't know if you can see what I'm doing there, but follow me. So, and I have 4 parametric bands of EQ. So I have the ability to make 4 choices like you were talking about there. So I'll use 1 to get the junk out, and then 2 to kind of extenuate some more of the fundamentals that are revealed once I get the junk out. Okay? Then we get down into a pan and kind of your standard stuff. Here's the beauty of this. It is the 100%, I'm getting one because I can't believe how cool it is. It sounds like an infomercial, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't want to do that. This little row of lights right here, see these guys? Those are fire-wired inputs. This is, how many buses can it record, Rick? 20-some? 27 outputs from this board can get recorded to your computer. Individual tracks, okay? So when I hit play here in a second, this is going to be my kick drum. Actually, this one's not plugged in, this one is, but so you can see it. That's going to be a kick drum. Here's the cool part. When the band was rehearsing, I hit record, and individual tracks go to my recorder. The band's done and they go home. We now go bunk, 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 and we take the outputs back, and I can go work on that kick drum sound without him on the stage. I can work on turn everything down and go, okay, kick and bass, let's see how they're working together. That's pretty cool to me. And nobody's doing this at this price point, which is why I'm so excited about this thing. So now that you see what I'm going to do here, I'm going to do it. Tower of Power. Sorry if you were at this seminar yesterday, we're going to do the same thing. All right. There's a nice little kick drum for us. On a digital soundboard, I have to select it so that my fat channel becomes active, and then I can do things like high pass and EQ. That's all I'm going to do right now. We're not going to make this class about compression and effects and all the real fun stuff. We're going to make this about practically how do I get a very quick sound check done on Sunday morning. So, hey, Mr. Drummer, can you hit the kick drum for me? Sure. He hits it, and I look at my meter, and I go, okay, that's a good level. I turn it up, and I listen to it, and I'm going to move. Listen, here's my high pass. See here what it's doing. So I'm moving that high pass up, right? Moving it back down, right? That's what a high pass does. You've heard it. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do that whole sweep thing I talked about. So I'm going to hit my low mid EQ. I'm going to boost the snot out of it, and I'm going to move it around. That's kind of stuff I might use. I don't like it, but it's possible to use. That's not good. Ooh, that's cool. That just does not sound like a kick drum to me. Okay. There it is straight. Actually, let me do this, all right? Okay. I don't like that one. Again, I'm just sweeping it around like you saw. I'm going to return it back to 0. It's not a bad sounding kick drum right there. But watch when I just take a little bit of that out that I just said I didn't like. Hear how that kick drum just really tightened up? Really, really nice. Okay? All I did was find the junk and get it out. Can you guys do that on Sunday? Mm-hmm. I mean, I could stop the seminar here. We're going to keep going. But now that you've heard that, that's the point. So I didn't tell you what it was. If you want to know, it was at 225. But quite honestly, I don't know that I've ever cut 225 out of a kick drum. But for some reason, it's working on this PA with this input and the mic wherever it happened to be in the drums. There's too many variables for me to tell you, take 160 out of your kick drum, it's going to be great. It's not true. Okay? So I'm going to mute that. Let's go with the snare here real quick. Okay? Same thing. Okay, that snare drum, Tower of Power, really loud band. Lots of stage monitors. We're going to hear a whole lot of other instruments every time I pull up an instrument because there's so much volume on stage that what am I hearing in here? That's just the snare mic. Tell me how loud that bass guitar and kick drum are in the monitors. So I need to isolate it. So I'm going to high pass that. So Mackie and folks with just the button, that's all you get because that's where your button's at. If you have something like this or any of the more digital and some of the more high-end analog boards, you can sweep it up higher. So I'm going to move it up. Hey, how about that? Yeah? So now I've high passed. I'm going to take a listen to some low mid EQ here and see what I do. That doesn't sound like a snare. Go back to 0. Take a little more of that out. It's pretty thin, but it cleaned it up. Agreed? So here's too much of that. Sounds honky and nasally. Let me get some of it out. Now, I've isolated and I've got a cleaner snare sound, but I don't like that snare sound. So I'm going to pause and I'm going to go, hey, can I have a couple more minutes with the snare? And I'm going to look around for something lower to kind of thicken that up a little bit. Let's see what happens when we do that. That's not there. I'm not hearing anything get thicker on it, are you? So guess what? the snare is not tuned in such a way that there's much on it that I can really get it out of it. So I won't call it garbage in at this point. I just wish that snare might have been tuned a little bit lower so it was a little thicker for me, because that's what I prefer. The picture I wanted to take is not the picture I've got right now, but it's not a bad snare. I can use that. So
it's too high, high frequency?
Yeah, he might have just tuned it up higher. Maybe the mic's a little too far off of it. I wasn't there when the setup, so don't know. But it's not a bad snare at that point, so we'll move on. Let's listen how those two interact together. Snare's pretty, I just don't like that snare. So you know what? Even though I'm going to get some leakage from that kick drum on that, I'm going to lower that high pass. That's just my snare mic. I got to get that real thick low end out of there. It's going to hurt me. Let's see if I can get any more in there. So, okay, I can't do it. I'm just not getting it. So I'm going to back down that low that I added there. And I'm going to go, okay, I can't get it thinner. So I might be taking a little bit of the sharpness out of this. I'm going to try it and see what happens. I've not really messed with this track but for a few minutes yesterday, so let's see. So I'm going to boost another one up high, and I'm going to try to find that real sharp stuff I don't dig. That's pretty bad. That's not bad. That's not good, but I think the one's right there. And so, I think that's it. Let's go back to 0. I'm going to take some of that out. Yeah? That just thickened up the snare. So it wasn't junk, but it was in the way of what I wanted. Now, I'm not sure that I might want that in the mix, because now the snare might be losing some of those upper harmonics that are going to make it really shine through. So I'll kind of just remember that I did that, going, I liked my snare better, but I might need to put it back once we get everything in there. Okay? Let's see what we got here. We got a little hi-hat, I think, next. So he's not playing, he's just stepping on the hat now, but obviously there's some kick in there, so let's sweep that high pass out. Let's see. There, I got rid of that. All right. Now, if you're on a board that doesn't have a sweepable high pass, you're not in dire straits, and you don't have to go to your board of directors or whoever approves purchasing and get a new mixer, though you probably should, and this is a good excuse to. That's the most, to me, if I had only one thing, if I had a gain and a fader and I had to choose one other feature on a mixer, it would be a sweepable high pass filter, because it's the most useful. Because what are we doing with it? We're getting rid of all that garbage down in the low end, right? That's what's going to clog our mix up and make everything real muddy, because the more that's happening down there that we don't want, i.e., we open that up, there's a little bit of that kick drum in there. Well, that hi-hat mic is here on the hi-hat, getting mostly hi-hat, but there's some kick. But it's hearing the kick from 4 or 5 feet away. But there's a mic in the kick that's 3 or 4 inches away. So remember trig class and our sine waves, same frequencies, we have a positive and a negative, depending on the wavelength, yada yada, another class. It's going to have some cancellation. Cancellation equals muddy. Cancellation equals not sounding good, right? Okay, so we want to clean it up. We'll do that. All right, let's see what's next here. I think this one. Wow, what's that? That's got to be a tom. That's a tom. I dig that. Okay, so let's do that. Let's listen to this. Okay, so that's a tom. And an awful lot of low end going on in there, so let's do our thing. Mackie folks, I just turned on your button. Sorry, didn't help much, did it? Let's sweep it up a little higher. That tom is still pretty huge. I'm going to sweep it a little higher. Let's see if just rewind a little bit. Just if you want to know, I've got that high pass filter all the way up at 180.
Wow.
So there's still a lot of low end. Okay, let me take it out. That's just going to, listen to my kick in that together. There's my nice tight kick drum. It's got more bass in it, but it's real floppy and not real, it's not as tight as it was. I'm gonna leave the tom up and I'm just gonna sweep that high pass out. Hear that kick coming right tight up in front of us? Yeah? Okay? Following what I'm doing? Yeah? I think this might be a tom here. Let's see, 6 is an overhead, cool. Here's a little statement on overheads, and I know some of you guys are in rooms like this where an overhead mic is pretty much pointless, or the overhead mic is the lead vocal mic, right? I said this story yesterday, but it's fun. I walked into a church recently, and there's a beautiful brand new electronic drum kit on stage behind a plastic drum shield. And I went, and I'm looking for the sound guy just going, seriously, bro, what's up with that? I mean, if you're having to run the electronic drums so quiet that you don't hear the rubber pad, and that's why you have the drum shield, he's like, oh no, not at all about that. The plastic drum shield is a complete political move. Political move, huh? Had acoustic drums, too loud. Buy drum shield, put drum shield up, still too loud. Buy electronic drums, take drum shield down, put electronic drums up, turn drums up in the mix. That's the point of having electronic drums, is I can now put them in my speakers and have some articulation and thickness out of them. Drums are still too loud. So he goes, watch it. I put the drum shield up. I didn't touch the soundboard. And the next weekend, everybody's like, gosh, it sounded so great this morning. I wish that was him, because that was, I mean, I'm just like, dude, you are brilliant. Brilliant. So if we can't fix it in the mix and we can't get the arrangement right, just fool them. Fool the world. All right, so here's the deal, overhead mics. I don't like cymbal mics. I like overhead mics because I want that drum sound to sound organic. Do you guys like the drum sounds I'm doing up there? The drum sounds I'm going for are different than what some guys do, and it's not bad, it's just two different schools of thought. Some guys want the super isolation, when they hit that cymbal, that cymbal is just there, and that's all that's in that mic in a way, okay? I want those overhead mics to almost sound like I could do the whole kit with just those. Listen to that. There's a lot going on there, too much bass guitar. That's just some really good overhead mics. If I had to, I could use that to base my mix on. It's not tight, but I could use it. But let's watch if I treat them like overhead mics. If I treat them like a drum kit mic instead of a cymbal mic, what I can do with this. So I'm going to high pass it a little bit. So I want to get some of that low end out so I don't have my kick drum being a problem. I can tell just by listening to this, he's got a cymbal and he's got the mic right here, because it's getting mostly cymbal. So this isn't going to completely work, but I'll show you. We can get a pretty good sound out of just an overhead mic. Boosting that EQ. That doesn't sound good to me. Sounding like a drum kit. Found it. Straight mic. Cutting it out. It's getting kind of usable. Notice as I'm doing that, things are getting turned down, so you might need to turn up a little gain or turn up your fader again. So let me just do that on the other one as well. Okay, so now, oops. Let's have some fun by panning them out. Yeah, cool stereo imaging going on there. Now, watch what happens. I got my kick and my snare, right? When I slide in my overhead mics, I don't even have any tom mics in there yet. That sounds like a drum kit. If I were to treat them like overhead only mics, a little more isolation, but I'm not so sure it sounds organic like a real drummer sound. Feel those richness things come in when I back those high passes down? This should be the drum miking class, I guess, as much time as I spend in here. Alright, so yeah, you guys caught that? all of this stuff applies to anything you're putting a mic on. So I'm sorry I spent so much time on drums if you don't mic your drums and you have an electronic kit. Sorry. The concept's the same. Yeah.
You don't have sweepable high pass, and you're trying to get rid of muddy low frequencies by downing the low frequency knob on your keyboard. What range of frequencies is that usually covering?
If you're just using your low EQ to do the same thing, it's not a sweepable one, you're saying?
Right.
Okay, the question is if you have a high pass filter that's just the switch and you want to do a kind of sweepable type thing, your only choice is to use your low frequency deal, okay? Most of those low frequency things are at 100, they're at a similar point as to where the high pass is, but you can get more out. So it's probably still going to work, you just can't move the frequency up. If there's still too much junk in there, the lower just kind of growly, yucky stuff, you might have to waste your parametric band to get some of that upper mid stuff out of it, right? Okay, so let's get some of this back. Okay, that's pretty cool. Let's see where our bass is here and just move along. All right, there's my bass guitar. Here's something that a lot of people don't know about bass guitars. Bass guitars put out a lot of bass. I find that a lot of times if I have got some nice subwoofers in my system sounding like I like it to sound when I play a CD, which should sound big and full, that I have to take low end out of the bass. Well, that's kind of crazy, isn't it? Not necessarily, depending on his technique, depending on the type of bass, if he's got an active or a passive bass or an old school Fender or a modern, I don't even know, whatever new modern bass, all the pickup systems and stuff are so interactive in the way they work and how it works and the way he plucks it, you might really have to cut some low end out of it. And let's see what happens. Okay, so let's take that guy right there. Now let's start with our low mid again and boost it. I'm gonna look. That's just horrible. I mean, not only is it loud, but it just doesn't sound like a bass anymore, right? And I'm really quite honestly not overdoing this for you. I want you guys to turn stuff this far so you're hearing it going, oh, that's, don't turn a vocal mic up like that, it'll probably squeal, but you know, you get the point. That's not good. There's the bass guitar. Let me move it around. Sweeping it. That's bad. Back to normal. Watch what happens. I'm going to take just about 5 dB out. Did you hear it? EQ off. EQ on. So that bass just got really, he's got a little distortion on the bass, I noticed yesterday, yeah. So that frequency, 100. It's fundamental frequency of a bass. Why did I told you to isolate the fundamentals, didn't I, and get them out there? It's too much. It's just, and it doesn't sound clean and tight. We cleaned it up. All right, now, because the kick and the bass are one instrument, it's a cool sounding kick. Let's see. I'm not gonna get him to the same level. Okay, of course. You guys know that when you reach for the knob, they stop playing. That's pretty much always the case. All right, Mr. Bass player, come in anytime. There he is. Okay. So, a fair sounding kick, a fair sounding bass, that in my opinion do not work together at all. I don't hate that. I don't hate that, but they're not working. So, a couple mental pictures. I think that kick drum needs to be a little fatter, so I cut some junk out earlier. Now I'm going to go, let's see what if I put a little bit of low end back on it. Oops, wrong button. What's going on here? Oh. There's this nice little button next to the EQ that says on. Sometimes you need to do that. I don't like the ceiling tile shaking. It's a little much though. Okay, so there's back to normal, but I found that frequency, liked it, it felt good. You might honestly be careful because I have knocked ceiling tiles and light fixtures out doing that trick, which is really cool. Hey, you knocked my light fixture out. Oh, I'm sorry. So I'm going to put a little in there. That's starting to feel like a kick drum. Yeah? Starting to feel the energy of that kick? Again, not a bad kick right there. That guy's feeling good. That's feeling like there's some energy on it, like some emotion maybe. Can I use that word? I don't know. Maybe. So cool. Let's see now what my bass is doing. Ooh, that bass kind of feels like some of those low notes are down in that same spot. Let's see if it works. Does that feel more like one instrument? Yeah. We could spend a whole lot more time, but you get the point there? Right? Okay. Okay? All I'm going to do right now is I'm going to take that low end off of that kick that I just did. I'm not going to change it. Does it feel like you've got the groove and it feels good right now? On. Feels cool. Off. Pretty subtle, but it sure feels like now they're working together. That kind of feels like they're not. Maybe my opinion, but I'm not. I see people nodding their heads. Okay, what do we got next here? We're running out of time, so we're going to go a little faster. There's a little keyboard. Sounds like a B3 action. I'm just going to put some high pass on that and clean that up. Move along. Ah, here we come. This is going to be fun. Power, power. I got to get some of that low end junk out of there, right, guys? Okay, coming back to that. These things up here, these are vocals, I think. Okay. There he is. There's my lead vocal.
And I know it too, baby.
Get some of that low end out.
Oh, it's got to be you.
Alright. Let's find some stuff going on there. Let's get rid of that one. Okay. Garbage in. No. Alright. Let's put this all back together so we can go to different spots. Alright, there's my kick and bass. There's my rhythm that we talked about, right? The rhythm, vocal, melody. Let's see what that vocal's doing. Where's he at? Here you go.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Mark Harper on guitar.
Okay. Feels cool, yeah? Are you missing the keys and the guitar and the horns? I could start the show right now if I had to. Do we need to pay the rest of the musicians to be? Sorry, no, because we don't have any melody stuff at this point. So it sounds good, but it's not done. But if all you got was those things, you could start the service, right? So let's put some stuff in here. Yeah?
Yeah.
Get it? Makes sense? Can you do it, Sunday? I didn't teach you any rocket science, guys. I mean, I just taught you to go. What I did is I think I just gave you the freedom to turn a knob. Yeah? How many people are up there and they feel like they got the handcuffs on? Yeah? I mean, I've worked for worship leaders who kind of go, dude, this sounds great. It's always sounded great. Please don't touch it. Okay. You guys need any help in video? You're not going to let me play my instrument. It's like going, hey, how about I just take 5 of your 6 guitar strings away? Anyway. All right, guys, that's what we got for today. We're out of time. Thank you for coming. Appreciate it.